put it back where it belongs. Thanks. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtotar Tata Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtotar Tata Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Krantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiri. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtapayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktim Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the 7th day of April 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in... Okay. We are in chapter 29 of the 4th canto, entitled Talks Between Narada and King Prachinabhahi. And this is actually the last verse in the chapter, although we have some extra information at the end. Okay. Text 85. Adhyatma Paroksham Idam Madhyadikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashrama Pungsash Chinno Amutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Mayadikam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Mayadikam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Maya Dikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Maya Dikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Maya Dikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Maya Dikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Maya Dikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Maya Dikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma Parokshямidam Maya Dikatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashramak Pungsash Chinno Mutra Chasangshayaha Adhyatma, spiritual. Paroksham, described by authority. Idam, this. Maya, by me. Adhikatam, heard. Adbhutam, wonderful. Evam, thus. Striya, with a wife. Ashramaha, shelter. Pungsaha, of the living entity. Chinnaha, finished. Amutra, about life after death. Cha, also. Sangshayaha, doubt. Translation. The allegory of King Puranjan, described herein according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. And this is Maitreya speaking to Vidura. If one can understand the purpose of this allegory, actually, that's a misprint, should be purport. If one can understand the purport of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is. In other words, if you didn't understand before, then one can fully understand it by studying this narration. Purport. The word striya, meaning along with the wife, is significant. The male and female living together constitute the sum and substance of material existence. The attraction between male and female in this material world is very strong. In all species of life, the attraction between male and female is the basic principle of existence. The same principle of intermingling is also in human society, but it is in a regulated form. Material existence means living together as male and female and being attracted by one another. However, when one fully understands spiritual life, his attraction for the opposite sex is completely vanquished. By such attraction, one becomes overly attached to this material world. It is a hard knot within the heart. Those who know this can chant along. Pungsastriya mituni bhavametam tayo mito vidya grantamaho ato grihat sheta sutapta vitta janasya moho yamaham mameti. Everyone comes to this material world attracted to sense gratification, and the hard knot of sense gratification is the attraction between male and female. By this attraction, one becomes overly attached to the material world in terms of griha, cheta, sutta, apta, vitta. That is, home, land, children, friends, money, and so forth. Thus one becomes entangled in the bodily conception of I and mind. I and mine. However, if one understands the story of King Puranjan, and understands how, by sexual attraction, Puranjan became a female in his next life, one will also understand the process of transmigration. Now, I'm not going to read this special note because this refers back to different parts of the chapter, and this is kind of an addendum, so we'll just end there for now. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmiritam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. So, we have come to the end of this 5-chapter allegory of the Narada speaking to King Prachana Barishat about Puranjan, who is, after all, the resident within the city of Nine Gates body, meaning all of us. It's meant to apply to, in general, to the conditioned soul, especially in the human form. And I did a little research. Does anyone know who the spiritual master of Maitreya is? Parashara Muni. So what is the result? This is part of the Palashruti, actually. If one can understand the purport of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. So it's a description of, as we've mentioned before, this foundational understanding to even begin spiritual life. And that is that the soul is different from the body. We lived before, we'll live again. But it's very dramatic how the living entity in this condition, in this material world, the conditioned soul, is completely bewildered. If you recall, I was reviewing these 5 chapters, just reading through the translations. And Puranjan goes out, and he goes out to the forest, and he sees this beautiful woman. And the beautiful woman is his own intelligence. But he becomes attracted in that way, and it goes on, and he becomes completely bewildered. He has many, many sons and some daughters, and he gets, after he came back from hunting, the hunting means that he was hunting for some other woman, some other enjoyment. And meanwhile, he comes back, and remember what happened? His wife wasn't there in the palace. She was lying on the ground, and he was so crestfallen. Thinking, what have I done? So in this way, that was a way of control. He had to apologize with her and plead with her, please come back, And then after that, it describes how he was completely absorbed in sex life and the expansions of sex, and he was totally controlled in that way. And the whole thing is just an allegory, meaning that it's meant to give us principles that apply universally for the conditioned soul. And Prabhupada makes the point very clearly there that, and here in this purport, that the binding force in this world is the attraction between the two opposite sexes. And you can see that that's essential for the propagation of the species. In other words, for other conditioned souls to come forward and take birth and for the whole thing to go on, there needs to be this process of reproduction. And it's centered on this attraction of man and woman. So, Prabhupada makes the point here in the purport that when one fully understands spiritual life, his attraction for the opposite sex is completely vanquished. So that word understanding there is more than just gyan. It's obviously vigyan. It's realized knowledge. So by the practice of bhakti yoga, by the practice of Krishna consciousness, we're meant to completely sublimate this lust into love of Godhead. The only platform upon which the attraction of the opposite sex is completely vanquished is when you're completely attracted to Krishna. What's that famous verse quoted twice in the Bhagavad Gita? Yadavadi mamacheta Krishna padadavinde navanamana sabdhaman yudyatam hrantamasi tadavadi batanari sangame smayamane bhavati mukhavikaro sustur nishtivanancha. That Yamunacharya, after having been a king and enjoyed like anything, as kings can do, with a harem, whatever he had, wife, now fully realized and enjoying, as he explains in this verse, at every moment, the pleasure of serving the lotus feet of Krishna. Mama Chaita Krishna Padaravinde, the lotus feet of Krishna, my mind is absorbed in serving and relishing constantly the pleasure of bhakti, pleasure, the prema, rasa. Then when I remember, because he had so much experience in this particular life, of sex enjoyment with a woman, it becomes a point of disgust for him, and he spits at the thought. Literally, he says he spits. Probably would say spite at it. He spit at it. So just see the kind of purity and realization that implies that all of that attraction, which is therefore inherent, it's built in to the material body, and if you don't have any process of yoga, or you're just living an ordinary life, that you have to become absorbed in that. It's just the imperative of being. So, and that's the binding force. Prabhupada quotes this, what should we say, seminal verse, Rishabdev teachings. One of Brahmachari verses. This is one of the main ones. Pungsa sriyamantani bhavameta. It doesn't give a full translation here. Actually, there's a nice link here to it. This is the translation from the 5th canto. The attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. This is 5th canto, chapter 5, text 8. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female, one becomes attracted to his body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. In this way, one increases life's illusions and thinks in terms of I and mine. And we learn again and again this aham mameti principle. This is the sum and substance of the false ego, right? The misconception begins with the misconception that I am this body, and the interests of this body, of the senses, are my interests. That's the idea. The senses are attracted to different sense objects. So when the mituni bhavam, this is the sex atmosphere, the whole things that happen with a man and a woman meeting, punsasya mituni bhavam, tayamado vidya grantamaho, and Prabhupada explains in the purport, I recall, when they actually have sex, and then the knots in the heart become very, very tight. And in any civilized society, this means, okay, now there's a marriage, and that includes griya, cheta, sutta, apta, and vitta. Now, griya is obviously the home, some kind of home where you can have your family and expand. Then comes the kshetra. Now, kshetra is, of course, a field, and that means that by and large, as in India even today, most people, there's an agrarian society, and you have a field, and you're farming it, and this is their livelihood. But kshetra in general can mean a job. There has to be some job to support everything. And then come children, Sutta, sons and daughters, and then Apta, the expanded family. All of the, that's also when you marry the woman and you marry the whole family. And of course, to support the whole thing, you need wealth, Vittaya. And just if there's only material life, whether it's in the Vedic culture or any culture, then your mind is completely absorbed in that. You're working very hard. Prabhupada describes in modern day, rather than working in a field, you have to drive somewhere to go to a factory and come back, all your day. And your joy is built on the sex life, and of course the children. There's attachment, tremendous, attachment grows for all of these things, and you're bound up. You're bound up very tightly. Janasima yam aham ameti. Everything is, you become completely bewildered by this I and mind. So this was what Narada Muni wanted to cure Puranjan of. He had, So he had become so absorbed in, and the interesting thing, I read back at the beginning when it first starts, and Puranjan himself was saying how I'm very entangled in family life, and he was very thankful that Narada Muni came. I mean, why did Narada Muni come to him? Well, he had these glorious sons, the Prachetas, who had already met Lord Shiva. They were undergoing severe austerities, chanting the song of Shiva underwater for 10,000 years. So he's not an ordinary king. And even though he was absorbed in all of this sacrifice, and killing animals, and right at the beginning, Narada Muni points out, these animals that you've cruelly slain, they're waiting for you. You think that you're going to go to heaven, but you're going to suffer a lot. They're going to pierce your body, with their sharp horns, get revenge. So he's kind of destroying. He's destroying the attraction for this whole sacrifice, And Puranjan, Pachanabari, he suspects it's wrong, So he's a good candidate. So how to counteract this false ego, which has been keeping us bound in not just the human body, any body you take, you identify with it. I'm this. This morning, I rarely have any insects in my apartment, because I've got one of those little, electronic. So for years, I've never seen it. But suddenly, today, as I was putting on my tilak, I saw this. I thought it was a little piece of debris in the sink, but no, it was a little worm. Somehow, I don't know, maybe it came from one of my vegetables or something. So, that worm, his whole life was, absorbed in trying to get out of that sink, which he couldn't do. He was trapped, So I said, well, what am I going to do? I have to take this worm out, and throw him outside, So they sense, as soon as there's a little movement, something's after me, and the whole flight and danger, instinct comes in. So he was wriggling, couldn't do much. I got him on a tissue, and I threw him out the door, And for him, it was like, redemption. I was sure I was a goner, because life is so delicate. It's so easy to be slain in this world, like a drop on a lotus leaf. So, but that little worm, with his rudimentary little intelligence and mind, he was living that life, and where there was danger, try to escape from it, and when there's something to eat, try to go for it. I got something to eat. In other words, it's very rudimentary, but it's the same principle. The Narada Muni describes the goal of life, because this is what Pachanabari asked him. Can you please describe me the real goal of life, how I can be happy? So first thing Narada says is that in any life, our life should be the impetus to action is, how does it go? Dukkha hani sukhanvita. Dukkha hani means to destroy unhappiness and maximize. Anvita means to maximize happiness. That's what everyone's doing. But they don't know how to do it. On the material plane, your attempts to enjoy simply ensure so much more suffering. This is a favorite verse I quote practically every class. Yehi sangsaraja bhoga dukkha yona evite. The pleasures that you enjoy from the contact of the senses with the sense objects are sources of misery and are temporary. And so the wise don't delight in them. This is the indirect translation. Or where do you look for happiness? Krishna consciousness. Bhaya sparsheshu asaktatma. Vindajatmani yat sukham sab brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam aschante. Where can you find akshaya sukha, unbreakable happiness? You can't find it on the material plane. It's just so frustrating. You know, you aspire, you have so many hopes, and then you work so hard, get an education, you go into debt. Maybe you get a job. Okay, we'll set up a household, and then you have a wife, and then the children, come, and you're making it. And there's so many burdens, there's so many difficulties, paying off the debt, the mortgage, this and that, and the health of your offspring and yourself. Now that's a factor. That's a basic factor. It's one thing after another. And so, but there's little bits of happiness. There's no question about it. The sex life, and of course, if the household stays together nicely, there's the children that gives some pleasure. But it's very fleeting, and it comes to an end. And it inevitably, you can see that's one of the advantages of getting old. You can see the whole sweep of your life. I remember my parents, growing up. They were a little older and all because my mother had 2 miscarriages. So by the time my brother came along, my mother was already in her mid-30s. I was in her late 30s, like that. Still, the house was there, Okay. And, we weren't rich or anything, but there was this little household, 2 kids and 2 parents, nobody, there was no divorce or anything, the parents, But eventually, my brother graduated from college. He moved away. I went to college. I was a problem kid because luckily I didn't I didn't stay in college. I came back. That's why I could join the movement. But still, it was the effort to be happy. I could see the whole sweep of life. And then my father got sick. He was always smoking cigarettes. Everyone did in those days. Growing up in the 30s and 40s. And drinking a little bit. He wasn't a lush or anything, but high blood pressure. All right, so he got sick. And then my mother, who was very saintly, she spent years in her 70s taking care of my father. He wasn't in some home somewhere he was taking care of, but eventually he died. She was alone. And so all the happiness turns into just a lot of kind of difficulty as time goes on. And that's being played out universally. Eventually, all the dreams and the hopes are dashed. That's very, very graphically described in the allegory. Where Puranjan, he's got it made. He's got his palace, and then his wife there, and he's enjoying sex, and he's got all these kids, But then time just goes on, and then he's attacked. And then there's Kala Kanya, old age, the daughter of time. And you couldn't avoid it, it's affecting him, and so eventually he gets, evicted from his house. Everything falls apart, and he gets reborn as a woman because of all of his attachment. Now, in that birth, of course, he meets super soul comes, so he has obviously some good characteristics in his background to have that. But that's the only way to cure the problem. You have to have the super soul or the representative of the super soul come to you and penetrate the aura and the illusion of happiness, and distress here. That there's, and give you a clue as to the reality beyond the curtain of Maya. Remember Kunti's second prayer. Maya Jamanikachanam Madhyaghokshanam Abhyayam. My dear Lord, you're at Hokshaja, you're invisible, you're covered by the curtain of Maya, and therefore no one can understand you. What to speak of us women, only the Paramahamsas can understand you. So who will break through that curtain? That's where the spiritual master comes, or the representative of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada came to America after tremendous efforts in India to try to start the movement. But he basically, couldn't make any headway. And so, we have this phrase in America, you go for broke, do or die. He had that order from his spiritual master. He had Lord Chaitanya's prediction. He had the blessings of the 6 Goswamis. He had his books, his ammunition. And he had his indomitable will and his heart full of mercy and compassion. And he took that leap on, into... As he says in that wonderful prayer, that he wrote, Markandeya Bhagavad Dharma. I have no assets. I don't, if you make my power of speaking adequate, it'll penetrate the hearts of these people, And again and again, we find these miracles. I've been reading that book by a spiritual master, Guru Swami. And just the whole first part, Dr. Nair has just died. And they have a second pandal in Bombay, and they have the deity set up, and there's a bunch of the devotees there, and so many people come, and there's the question and answers which everyone loved, and then there's this little play, and Prabhupada loved the play, and then there was a kirtan, and Prabhupada started dancing, and everyone got up, and it's described there, it was like all of everyone's sinful reactions were lifting off. It was like light was coming down. It was a mystical experience. And the devotees worked so hard, so many austerities. And as we've heard, that was the source, their great bliss, is that they were surrendering, really working so hard. So part of what, the work of Good Prabhupada was always working as hard as he could, managing, writing the letters, dealing with problems. I mean, this where Prabhupada wanted that piece of land. He brought the deities on there, and they were making so many life members. And then there was this incident where two of his devotees, I won't name them, but they're very famous, they decided this piece of land, the rats are here, it's impossible. Prabhupada was away, he said, we can't fight for this land. And he gave it back. They tried to cancel the contract. And somehow Prabhupada saved the situation. And then Mr. Nair died. And then it's after that, apparently, where the raid came. It was his wife who ordered the raid. Anyway, it's such a incredible story. And, forever. Now it's like, 40, 50 years later. And it's inspiring. And it's going to be inspiring for 10,000 years, these things. Because it's the principle of, serving the Lord, making promise to the Lord, and trying like anything to provide the facilities for the worship, and everything Prabhupada do to train and encourage the devotees. These are universal principles we're seeing there. So part of what Prabhupada is doing all this time is writing these books, getting up in the middle of the night, dictating a few more chapters, as he did here. I worked on this book. This one word, purpose, I discovered in my reading. I think I mentioned this before. This is one of the words that Prabhupada would use in a way that wouldn't be understood so well by modern Americans, using purpose to mean purport. And it can kind of send you off. But this is what this word means. There's no question about it. So what we have here is this allegory is meant for us. I mean, this, as all the books are, this universal principle of this is the situation. You want to increase your happiness, and you want to decrease your misery. There's only one way to do that, and make a solution to all of life's problems. You can have an illusion of defending against unhappiness for some time here. This is part of Maya's trick. Oh, we got this medical system, we got the defense system. I got my exercises, I got this. I'm good. I'm warding off it. But it's just an illusion. And on the happiness side, I'm enjoying. Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita that sense of enjoyment is the worst enemy of the spirit soul, material enjoyment, because it decreases or destroys the impetus for self-realization. If you're suffering, and it's not catastrophic suffering where you can't even think, but it's something that convinces you that my efforts to enjoy have failed. And at the same time, you have a book that you got from a devotee, one of the Srila Prabhupada's books, that you finally decide to read because maybe this will help, or you meet a devotee, or he's come to the temple, or somehow or other you get in contact. It's a blessing to be in distress, really, and it gives you hope, and it gives you a whole way of thinking about your life. Then that can be the turn in your life where you take up Krishna consciousness. I know it was for me. There's always that element, often that element of distress that leads you to solve it. So this is an invaluable lesson, and it contains so many principles here. You know, this verse, the Bhagavatam is so wonderful because it's so concentrated. You know, one verse, this Pungsastriya verse. I mean, if you're open to it, you can see, yeah, this is really, you know, what material life is all about. It's going on everywhere. It happened to me, or it's happening to me. And you can see, Janasya Moham, this is the illusion, the spell of Maya is going. So where is reality? Then where is reality? Well, if you're reading the Bhagavatam, it's all over the place. The real platform of enjoyment is to cure yourself, you know, by the process of bhakti, of your infatuation with the material body and the senses, through the process of discipline. There has to be relationship with a spiritual master, so that you'll be serious about performing austerities, which are essential. This is also Rishabdev in his first verse. You know, this human life is meant for austerity, for purifying the senses, purification. Nayam deho deha bhajang loke kashtan kamana David bhajange. Those two lines is meant to wake you up. This human form of life is not meant for working hard to enjoy happiness that's available to the hogs. You know? Probably love to talk about the hogs, how they have sex with anybody, they'll eat anything, and they're in hog heaven. You know? Until the guy comes and slaughters them or something, you know. But too often, human beings, especially in this Kali Yuga, think that this is the way they can be happy, by maximizing sense gratification, maximizing sleep and sex and you know, abominable foodstuffs. And of course, there's the demons go this uncontrollable desire to eat, and they engineer foods that are literally addictive, and people become so unhealthy. You know, epidemic. There's an epidemic of we have our pandemic here, but it's an epidemic of obesity and overweight in America, and not just in America. Wherever these foods are available, you know, and especially poor people, they have what they call food deserts, you know, where poor people live. We're so lucky here. We got, I got Sprouts and Trader Joe's, and but in many of these places, the only food you can find is this unhealthy engineered food, the processed food. You know, people get in. So to be able to associate with devotees and read Prabhupada's books and wake up from the spell of Maya, this aham mameti, that I am this body, and satisfaction of bodily senses and mental concoctions is the goal of life. No, the body itself and the mind and your intelligence are all coming from God. They're coming from Krishna. And when we link them back up through service, as devotional service, as explained scientifically in the books of Srila Prabhupada, and shown by his sincere devotees, then we can become cured of this disease of lust, and we can overcome it. We can control it. It may take some time to really be disgusted by it, but we can control it because we have a higher platform of enjoyment. Great kirtan festivals, devotional service. You become absorbed, and that doesn't affect you. So that's otherwise it's impossible. It's not going to happen by some impersonal realization. It's not going to happen by just your own willpower or understanding. This is visceral. It happens by literally purifying your senses, your mind, your intelligence, everything you have, and engaging it all in Krishna's service. Then you get the blessing. He blesses you with taste. He blesses you with a higher taste. Pabantiye. We heard yesterday. This was an extraordinary, wonderful class by Navina Nirada Prabhu. What was the phrase? Mukunda Kata. Yasha, yeah. The fame, name and fame and glories of Krishna. There's a taste there. What does it say right at the beginning of Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter? Shinvatam sukata Krishna punya shamana kirtana ridyandaksto yabhadrani vidunoti suritsatam. Now he gave a very interesting explanation of vidunoti, because vidunoti means to clean. But anyway, so the instrument, yeah. So the whole previous verses are leading up, describing, that real dharma is that which engenders pure devotion to Krishna, hokshaja, which is unmotivated and uninterrupted. And dharma artha kama moksha are dealt with there. Life's desires, karma, is not meant for sense gratification. You should live as simply as possible, keeping body and soul together, and inquire into Brahman. Tattva Jigyasa, it's right out of the first verse of the Vedanta Sutra. The Bhagavatam is the commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So, and what is that? What is that Brahman? What is that Tattva? Vedanti Tattva Vidas. Who knows the rest? Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavanti Shabdite. So how to understand? Tatcharadana Muniyo Jnana Vairagya Yuktiya. One who is with faith, has faith in the Guru and the Shastra and the process. Jnana Vairagya Yuktiya, and is equipped with knowledge and realized knowledge and detachment, and executes bhakti according to what is there in the Shrutis or in the Shastra, can realize it, And therefore, it's described, he deals with Varnashram. The whole goal of Varnashram is to please Krishna, right? Therefore, one should constantly tasma ekena manasa bhagavan satpatam shoti vyakti tabdija jayet puja nijada. With one point of attention, one should hear, chant, remember, worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that will produce what? The sword of remembrance. I say that remembering Krishna, those knots in the heart, which is what we're talking about here, get cut. Yadanudyasina. Anudyasina is the sword of remembrance of the Lord. Karma granti nabandhanam chindanti. Kovidas nikonakaya. Who would not be attracted to hearing about Krishna? So you can sharpen that sword, And so the answer is getting that attraction. How do you get the attraction? That's the key. Get the attraction to hear the fame of Mukunda, the glories of the Lord. That comes from serving the pure devotee. Shushusho Shradhanasya Vasudeva Gatadashi Syan Mahatsevaya Vipra Punyatirtana Shevana. By serving the spiritual master, following the principles carefully, then that grows. And then when you're eager to hear, and you're hearing regularly, then Krishna within the heart, he's cutting these knots and transferring the attraction to him. That's the whole idea. Krishna is not different from that sound, and he's all attractive. So once some of the crud is gone from our hearts by this Hare Krishna mantra, right, we become attracted to Krishna, which is the greatest blessing, that attraction. And we should cultivate that through regulated devotional service. And that's the lesson here, and that's what Narada Muni is describing. And what's Prachanand Bhari's response? Leave home. You leave and go to the forest. He's now just like his sons left, and they're becoming attracted. They're chanting the great song of Shiva. And so the principle is universe in every age. The outer process may be a little different. We don't have to go to the forest. Go to the temple. And if you want to really renounce, join up. Become completely, or at least make your life such that it's centered on Krishna consciousness and detached life, and full of Krishna, katha. So that's we've been through this is the last verse actually describing all of this. So there's some great lessons here, and it's always basically similar lessons. Don't get bewildered by the phantasmagoria of the material world, and let yourself be fall under the spell of Maya. Don't engage in this material world in the modes of nature. Cultivate the mode of goodness and associate with devotees, and in this way wake up, sleeping soul, to the great boon that you have. And mostly in this age, the inevitable central instruction: chant Hare Krishna. Anyone can do it. I'm listening to Prabhupada lectures. He's constantly coming back to that. Chant a holy name. What do you have to lose? We're not charging anything. You can chant. And the more you chant, the more you'll become attracted to Krishna. The more you'll be interested in this. The more you want to associate with devotees. And then when you're really serious, you take up a formal, structured process. Because it's a razor's edge. It's so crazy. This is Kali Yuga. If you let up your guard, if you slack off on your sadhana, Maya's right there. Prabhupada would always quote this verse. What is it? Krishna Buli Javi Bhoga Vanchakori Nikatasta Maya Tare Japati Yadari. As soon as you forget Krishna, Maya's right there. It's just like, they have these football games, She's ready to tackle you. Pull you down, cover you over. Has the two opponents covering and pulling down. And then you're bewildered again, and you can't control your senses. So we have to become strict and become regulated in our devotional service. That regulation is important. The mind becomes used to it, and develop the wonderful taste that is really what it's all about. That taste matures into attraction, into bhava, and into prema. It's right there, Rupa Goswami. Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll stop there and read the translation once more. The allegory of King Puranjan described herein according to authority was heard by me from my spiritual master, Maitreya speaking, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. If one can understand the purport of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. Although one may not understand what a transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration. Any comments, additions, subtractions? Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Dravida.
Hare Krishna, Raj.
Did Srila Prabhupada, I doubt whether he said special note, but did he speak these words at the end of the purport?
Yeah, devotees didn't add this on their own.
Then Srila Prabhupada, probably after the purport, he said, according to Vijaya Dwaja.
Yeah.
Do you understand how this unpeels, how it unpacks? The first two of the following verses, so that's easy. We just continue on. Two more verses. They appear after verse 45. Okay, according to that Acharya, they should be there. But what are the remaining two verses?
No,
there's not four verses after this, is there?
According to Vijayadvaita, who belong to Madhacharya, the first two of the following verses appear after verse 45. So that's text 1a and 2a. And the remaining two verses, they give a translation, there must be some more verses down here, no? Oh, there's a whole purport probably. So now comes...
Okay, it
1b,
says 3.
Yeah.
So that first verse with 1a, 1 and 2a, that would be two verses then.
Yeah.
So
That's the way I
45,
understand.
and then the second, 29, 1b. Okay.
Yeah. In the course of working on Prabhupada's books, of reading Prabhupada's books, you'll occasionally see there's another reading, for this, for a word, and therefore it means this.
Yeah.
And
Viro and sober.
Yeah.
That was your class.
Vira and here, yeah. And apparently in this chapter, there are other verses that are there in different versions of Bhagavatam. And that means that they were commented on and acknowledged by some commentators. Here's Vijayadvaja, was one of the commentators in the books. So that you'll find that in the Bhagavatam in some places, There's, in my own little, work on the Bhagavatam, it's no mystery, I'm into like the meter of the verses, So we're working on the 10th canto. That's why I did most of my work on the Bhagavatam, working in 10th canto and 11th and 12th, but mostly 10th. And we get to the songs of the gopis, text 35, chapter 35. Each of them has different meters, but this has a very attractive meter. So then you get to one verse, and the word sparsha comes in. Sparshena, by the touch. I forget the context of it. But it doesn't fit the meter. And I have to write to my Sanskrit consultant now. Gopi Puranandan was for many years, and he passed away 10 years now. And you'll find other verses in the Bhagavatam where for that very reason, to fill out the meter, the word is not sparsha, but sparasha. You add that extra A in there. And I want to write to him and see if that sparshena could be sparashena. And so you'll find that these... and also another interesting thing, like names. In Sanskrit, because a lot is put into, making it fit. We're reading these and they all, have wonderful meters, but it took a lot of work, So like in the Vidagdha Madhava, there's names of so many gopis, and one of them is Kundalata. She's a dear associate of Radharani, which means a jasmine creeper, But her name can also be, in the verses, Kundavalli. Valli is another word for creeper, And this came up in the CC, where Srivas Thakur is referred in some verses in the Madhya Lila, chapter 1 as Srinivas. And in the first, when it was produced in 1975, that became Srinivasacharya. But he didn't appear too much later. This is Srivas Thakur in Jagannath Puri. So when I revised it, also it's Srivas Thakur, or in the synonym Srinivas, parentheses, Srivas Thakur. Because Srinivas and Srivas mean the same thing. The word Nivas and Vasa can be the same thing. So you learn about this. And this, in Prabhupada's English, there were words like that. Like purport and purpose, and sufficient, and great. In American, sufficient means enough. And there's one verse that was completely misunderstood by the first editor, when Krishna and a lot of the Pandavas and everything, they were in Ganges, they were going to worship or grieve really for all the fallen soldiers. Bhishma had passed and everything. So there was a procession, and Krishna joined them, and the word brisham is used in the Sanskrit, which means greatly, but Prabhupada sufficiently. Because they use it sometimes. Mostly it means enough, but sometimes it means tremendously, a lot. So, they had grieved sufficiently. Well, that doesn't sound right. Grieved sufficiently, but so the first editor put it somewhere else. But really, after they had greatly grieved a tremendous amount, they went and bathed in the Ganges. There's little things like that, but you have to watch out for it.
Can I ask you about how your mind's working on how purpose doesn't fulfill the meaning of the sentence he's giving in the verse? The reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. So if you understand why it exists or why it was spoken, then you would become free. Yeah. But I looked into other commentations, and I saw that this is really commentations of
this on this particular verse.
Acharyas.
Yeah, the Acharyas, and it's all about if you can understand this whole explanation, and understand means understand the meaning. I mean, this is why purpose got in there, because it did make some sense. But
Prabhupada didn't choose that word.
Huh?
Are you saying Prabhupada
said purpose.
Okay.
Prabhupada said purpose, and you can see how it could have some meaning there, but it has much more meaning if you just say if you understand this, and it's kind of intricate. What's the purpose of the Vedas? Right at the beginning of the Ishopanishad, the introduction. There it's kind of obvious, because he said the word Veda can mean different things, but in the end the purpose is one. Probably obvious there that it means meaning, right? In the end, it is one. It means knowledge, like that. Anyway, I can give you more details on this. Yes, Prabhu. Oh, we have a question over here.
Prabhuji, is there any... I would like to know if there is anything about the sage Maitreya which you can share, because I know that Vidura met Maitreya while he was traveling all over. I'm just...
Yeah, he met him, and this is all part of what he spoke to him at that point. These chapters that we're reading are Maitreya, third canto, the fourth canto is spoken by Maitreya to Vidura. Maitreya was a dear friend of Vyasadeva, we know that. dear friend of Vyasadeva, And I didn't do too much research. I got to the point, because I wanted to try to figure out who his spiritual master was, and I found that. But he's, a very, key figure. And what happens is Vidura meets Uddhava. And, and Uddhava had gotten, the whole 11th, the Uddhava Gita, and Vidura wanted to learn from him, but Uddhava is younger than Vidura, and he thought it wasn't possible. So he sent him to Maitreya, and Maitreya then speaks this part of the Bhagavatam. So I'm sure there's much more about Maitreya. Very learned, one great devotee, and therefore he was the right person for Vidura to hear from. Go ahead.
It's not totally clear to me when, with the special note, does Srila Prabhupada, it seems that he doesn't fully accept that these were, it's not clear, are these last 4 verses part of the original Bhagavatam? It seems that if they were, then he wouldn't include them, but he still gives purports to them. Srila Prabhupada still gives purports to these verses. So...
Well,
does he consider them?
I have to let me. I don't want to speak out of turn and say something wrong. All I know is that this is unusual. Obviously, in the Bhagavatam, you don't see it very much. I think it happens somewhere else, one other place. But because in the Bhagavatam that Srila Prabhupada was using to translate, these verses must have been there, and they were given as an addendum. As that in some edition, in some editions which are accepted. These verses appear, and so we're giving them to you here now. If you look at those verses and insert them in those places, I haven't done that lately. I haven't seen it, but I remember that. Okay, this gives more information. It just fits right in. And, it's something that obviously is not out of place. But because in the edition that Prabhupada was using, it was seen as just like you find in a dictionary, here's the pronunciation, but it's also like this. In other words, generally you pronounce it this way, but if you hear someone pronounce it this way, it's okay, but it's a secondary thing. You know what I'm saying? So they're setting up a little hierarchy here, and it's saying this, is for the most part we haven't seen these verses, but they have been in some editions, and they've been commentated upon, and they probably write little purports for them. So we want to include them here as an extra, something further that you can use to understand. That's just enhancing the whole chapter.
So adding them at the end rather than putting them in there, because if you're going to include them, it seems like you could just put them in there, but it seems that Srila Prabhupada and also other acharyas also specifically put them at the end rather than inserting them there and putting a note there saying some will include this.
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
So. Yeah. So Vijay Devaja Tirtha says that these appear.
Consecutive?
Yeah, consecutive. He says, but not everyone has that Bhagavatam edition.
Right.
Now, when you talk about the acharyas, Prabhupada always stress that they're all right.
Yeah.
Because this is what's usually built to them.
Right.
So it is to our benefit for Prabhupada sharing. His Bhagavatam, by the way, would have been 10 acharyas commentaries, right? That's the Bhagavatam.
Yeah, that he is. Yeah.
So in that commentary for this acharya,
Yeah.
whatever you want.
It's just more nectar. I mean.
I just wanted to comment because it's not that it's higher or lower, it's all absolute.
Yes, absolutely.
It's coming from the heart of
Yeah.
a child.
Yeah. And the fact that Prabhupada, saw fit to write commentary on it. I mean, if he hadn't thought it was that important, he probably wouldn't have included it and written his purports on it. So it's worth obviously reading, and I'm not sure. I didn't quite know what to do with it there because it does harken back to a different part of the chapter, and it was kind of so. That's why I kind of was a cop out. Whoever gives class tomorrow will have to decide whether they want to read that.
They're nice purports.
Just read the next verse in order.
Okay.
Yeah, the other are nice purports. So it would be,
They're great.
But I mean, this is text 85. Going back to text 45. No big deal. All right, all glory to Srila Prabhupada.